Click and record, and we are going to continue tonight. We began last week a series on tefillah, a series on prayer, and we're going to continue tonight with, I guess, a bit of a long introduction. It's going to take us a few weeks just to introduce the concept, and then we'll get into actual hands-on tefillah, hands-on prayer, and how to do it, and what to say, and what to think, and what to feel, if that makes any sense. Not that we're going to tell you what to feel, but how do you access your feelings is more correct. But at least now what we're trying to do is we are trying to introduce tefillah, introduce prayer by really exploring what are the inner mechanics. What are the inner mechanics of prayer? In the sense of, what are we trying to generate when we pray? How does prayer work? Why is prayer so important? And sort of, all that jazz. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's just do a quick review of what we began discussing last week, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into that tonight. Hold on a moment. Okay. So hopefully you see my screen. And last week we explored the Hebrew word for prayer, which is the word tefillah. So we spoke about what is the root of this word tefillah. So we presented two different possibilities as to what the root of the word tefillah is. One is the word ptil, which is a thread. And we said that the thread is the idea of tying, binding two things together, the thread that unites them. The second one was pilel, which is to judge, or judgment. And we pointed out that over there, the judgment that's taking place is a person trying to develop a sense of inner clarity. That's who the AG was. It was Ari Goldstein. The mystery is solved. So we said that that both of these, this idea of psil, the idea of it being a thread, something that binds, and pilel, which is judgment or inner clarity, tells us that what we're trying to do when we pray is trying to put ourselves in a state of mind, of connection with the Almighty, connection with God, connection with the divine, connection with our soul, connection with our higher consciousness, so that it can bring us, it can elevate our consciousness so that we'll be able to access a clarity that only comes from a peace of mind, a holiness of mind. When our consciousness, I'm going to speak slow now because I want to articulate this the right way, and I want you to be able to receive it the right way. It's only when our consciousness is raised to that level to a spiritual level, to a higher level, can we access that higher level clarity, to be able to see the world with that higher level clarity. So still, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bind ourselves to this higher consciousness so that we can become our own inner judge, our own clarity. And once we access that place of consciousness, now even when we leave prayer, even when we stop praying, even when we stop the act of praying, we're only stopping prayer, the activity. But really, like we said from King David says, Va'ani tefillah, and I am prayer. What does that mean? I am prayer. It should be I pray. The answer is that no. Prayer is not the activity. There is an act of praying. But what prayer is, what tefillah is a level of consciousness. Tefillah is a state of mind. And that is one that a person is supposed to be in all of the time. So when you're doing an act of prayer, you happen to be praying. But if you do it with if it reaches its desired goal, then you want to be able to maintain that throughout the day, all the time. Whereas any moment, every moment, you can say you are in a state of prayer. It doesn't matter if you're speaking to God, it doesn't matter if you're by yourself, it doesn't matter if you're communicating with somebody else. Your state of mind, your whole life is going up against that backdrop of tefillah, that backdrop of prayer. We'll go into this idea with a little bit more clarity tonight, but any questions or points that anyone would like to make thus far?
I want to make just a little comment about what you said last week
Please.
that I've been thinking about all week.
Oh, yeah.
So I also am not a tech person, and I did not know that when you listen to a podcast, it downloads.
Oh, that was probably the most useful information I've ever shared on this platform.
It really was, because I was thinking, I was reading all this stuff about, consciousness. We're only like 1% conscious, but like we do download this information that's constantly running in the background. Yeah. And that was just that came up for me so much this week.
Yes, public service announcement, by the way, to anyone who was not here last week and did not hear. So again, this was it was sort of a long metaphor, but just forget the metaphor. Public service announcement. When you listen to podcasts on your phone, at least my phone and the app that I use, it saves the podcasts on your phone. So if you listen to podcasts, it's going to use up your memory unless you delete your podcasts. Just FYI.
That's what I was thinking about, like with prayer. Like it is a state of mind, but because I've definitely, I was just that just kept coming up for me this week.
It's embedded, exactly.
Because and I was like, oh, and I was able to kind of like touch back into it.
Beautiful, beautiful, 100%. That was the metaphor. Okay, Kayla and Emmett, I don't know if you guys were here last Monday night. Emmett, if you listen to those podcasts, make sure every so often to delete them off the memory of your cell phone because they're zapping your memory. All right. Okay. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's dig a little bit deeper into, I'm just seeing if we said hi to everyone on the side. I think we got everyone. Jason's on. Hey, Jason. All right, I think we got everybody else. All right, so I'm sharing my screen with you again, and let's go into this idea a little bit deeper. In many, our last series we did the alphabet. So if you didn't know Hebrew for the alphabet one, it was a little bit tricky, but at least you got to see the letters. But typically, we don't get, in these series, we try not to get too heavy on the Hebrew because everyone's coming from a different background, and I want to make these classes as accessible to everybody as possible. That being said, when we have a class like this one, which is really getting to the heart, to the core of Jewish spirituality, I want to feel like I'm giving you over sort of an authentic language. Even when I read books, and again, I've shared this with everyone here, many times, where I like to dabble in other religious practices, other spiritual practices, not dabble in practicing them, but at least to understand, especially like I've always been interested in sort of like the Eastern spiritual movements, and I read a lot about it, and it's part of getting to know another spiritual practice is to know a little bit of the lingo. It's like when you go to the yoga studio and everyone's like, yeah, namaste. Namaste, like they don't, they can't, these are people that like only know English, don't even have a second language, but they'll be quick to like, namaste, So like, it's good sometimes to just know a little bit of the language, and especially, a Jewish person should have some of the lingo, especially when we're taught to be able to converse about Jewish spirituality and have to translate everything into English kind of takes some of the fun out of it. So what I'd like to do is to teach you guys just 5 words. 5 Hebrew words that I want to be able to bounce around in this series freely and that you're aware of what it is. So I'm going to teach you a couple of words here. And again, where exactly these words fall into place, you'll see as the class and as the series goes on. But take some notes on this. And by the way, I'm happy to share this whole presentation with everyone. In fact, maybe I'll post it on our Facebook group, the Cafe Night Crew. Hopefully everyone is on that, and I'll be able to just post this. But either way, take some notes, and it'll be fun for you to try to remember these terms. So the first one is emunah. This is probably one that everyone here has heard. Emunah, say it. Good, you can say it while you're muted. You don't have to unmute to say it. Emunah. Emunah that's a classic one, and emunah is a belief and an awareness of God in your life. We're going to speak a little bit more about emunah and get into this word because it's actually a fascinating word. But at least to begin, people will translate emunah as faith. Faith is not a very telling definition of it, because what does faith mean? Does faith mean that you believe in a creator? Well, that's an important part of emunah, but it's not emunah. Emunah means a belief, but also an awareness of God. Right? Just because if I would ask you, do you believe in God? You say, yes, I believe in God. That does not mean that you have emunah. Emunah means a belief, but also a constant awareness of God, so that as you move through your day, you are seeing the world and processing the world as God's tool, as an extension of God. You're seeing woven into your life story the godly hand. Life, we'll talk about this a little bit more. Life, it's a completely different life. For those, and again, you don't have to feel that you have full belief in God's hand in your life, even though Jewish tradition does believe that God is extremely, extremely active in the storyline, in the narrative of your life. And if you have trouble processing that, or that's confusing to you, you're not alone. It's probably the most difficult theological thing to process is the interwovenness of God into my life story that seems to be based on my decisions, on other people's decisions, on the natural flow of life. To say that actually God is running the show is definitely difficult to wrap our heads around, but we do believe that. We do believe that. But even more than that, and we're going to see this a little bit more tonight, even more than that, we believe that to the extent that you're going to see God in your life is going to be directly correlated, directly connected to how much you make yourself into a vessel for godliness to flow. And when you decide that you want to wear God glasses today, and you're going to see the world through the lens of, okay, God, I want to find you in my life story. If you're really the author of the story, I want to see it. And you look for it and you say, okay, today I'm going to look for it. I'm going to look for God in the story. The same way that you might read a classic piece of literature. And when you understand the author, you'll say, I see the author in this. If I read book A and book B and they're different authors, even if they're telling the same story, but they're leaving their signature throughout, I want to see God's signature throughout my life. That's emunah. That's living with emunah. Question on the side. Great. That is a wonderful question on the side. Somebody asks, do we have to 100% believe in God to be a vessel for godliness? I'm going to repeat the question, and as I repeat the question, I want everyone to listen to the question and process the question. Do we have to 100% believe in God to be a vessel for God, to be a vessel for godliness? I would say that I don't believe that there's such a thing as 100% believing in God. I don't think that believing in God can be measured in those terms, because I believe that everybody on this call, unless you've proclaimed yourself to be an atheist, but if you are open to any level of belief in God, then you 100% believe in God. Now, how you process God, how you understand God, no two people are the same. And the more that you grow, the more that you'll process God in a different way. And the more that you'll see God's hand in a different way. But that's true about everybody. There's no one who could say, I 100% believe in God. What does that mean? To say I 100% believe in God, if you mean 100% understand God, well, then none of us can say that we have that 100%. Because we don't have those tools. The minute that you say, I'm open, I believe that God is present, and I just don't understand how, but I'm willing to look for that in my life, then you are a vessel for godliness. The minute that you open yourself up to that, then you're a vessel. If you're not looking, or if you prefer to not see God in your life, then you're not a vessel for godliness. Okay, we'll get back to that. So let's just put that on hold for a moment, and we will return to that soon. There's a term that is bounced around, especially that comes more from Eastern spiritual consciousness, and that is, it's an English word, enlightenment. Enlightenment is a word that's bounced around a lot in the spiritual community of any religion. Every religion has their word for enlightenment. Buddhism probably comes from Hinduism. I don't know if it's Hinduism or Buddhism, actually. One of those two have used the term samadhi. Anyone here ever heard the term samadhi? Let's see, everyone. Samadhi is a term that's used, but every religion has its term for enlightenment. Nirvana is another one that's used. So what is the Torah word for enlightenment, for nirvana, for spiritual bliss? So there are two words that you will find, one used in the Torah, the other used more in Kabbalistic literature. To explain, to speak about what is that term of enlightenment, and what is enlightenment? Meaning, what enlightenment is really is just a mind that is open to connect and to be completely aware of of the divine, or at least of the higher levels of oneself. The two terms in Judaism, the first one is dveikus, or if you speak more with the Israeli pronunciation, you would say dveikut. I'm not used to saying that because in my yeshiva background, the Lithuanian, Eastern European yeshiva background, we said the t as a sa. So the way we pronounce it is dveikus, but you could say either dveikus or dveikut, however you'd like to say it. But what that means, that comes, if anyone over here is very familiar with Hebrew, that comes from the word devek, like glue, two things that are attached. Are called, or devek is glue. So dveikut means complete attachment to the higher levels of oneself, complete attachment to God. Speaking more on a level of how that looks in one's consciousness, you'll often find it called da'as, or da'as elyon. Da'as really just means consciousness or connection. Elyon means when you see das elyon, it means expanded consciousness, but we're just going to call it das. So these are things, so that's expanded consciousness, the ability to process the higher levels of oneself. Let's clarify for a moment. I'm guessing everyone here knows what I'm talking about, but just in case I'm speaking Chinese, let's just try to clarify this a little bit more for everybody on the side. And by the way, anyone could ask a question. If these are new concepts, if it's not resonating.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
About das.
Yeah.
Is this the das? Is the same thing as dad in like the Kabbalistic thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Same word.
Exactly. Dad.
Okay.
That's the concept that we're speaking about. So let me just clarify what we mean over here by consciousness. We operate on many different channels. We operate as bodies, we operate as emotions, we operate as intellect. And we process the world depending on what channel of consciousness we're on. So for example, let's just take an example that everybody can relate to. Moods. We all have varying moods. And depending on the mood that we're in, we're going to process the world differently. So whereas there is only one Kate Samuelson, but depending on what time of day, depending on what she's going through, depending on a lot of different factors, you're not always going to get the same reaction. It could be the same situation, but you're not always going to get the same reaction. Because Kate, as a human being, has moods, and because of that, she's going to process the world around her different ways in different times. Right? So therefore, that's just, you see that with moods. Now, if let's say you love somebody, you go through phases. At one moment of the day, that love might be unlocked and you might feel it pouring through you. And you might want to just be next to the person, and every single thing that the person does and says is magic. And an hour later, for whatever reason, you don't feel that way about the person. You don't love them any less. But for whatever reason, whatever the factors are, you're not feeling that feeling of closeness. So you're the same person, the love is the same, but the level of consciousness that you're operating on is different. Even just slightly, is just a slight difference. If a person, you might have difficulty understanding, you might learn something or read something, and you didn't understand it properly. You didn't understand it, or it didn't make sense to you, or you're thinking about a certain problem that you're trying to solve and you're struggling doing that. And then you're in the shower and you're totally relaxed and you have the hot water that's pouring on you and your brain switches into a different mode, and suddenly you understand it, or you sleep on it and you wake up the next day and it makes sense. Right? So again, same person, same brain, but your consciousness changed. You went from busy during the day consciousness to relaxed shower or relaxed sleep, or your brain went into REM, whatever it is. So we, as human beings, even though we're one human being, we're not always the same in that sense. We're constantly moving and fluctuating and processing the world differently. Now, we're really only, if you take even the various moods and the various emotions and the various levels, we're still only processing the world in ways that we are trained to process it because of our nurturing, because of our upbringing, because of the situations that we put in. I might know that whenever I go into the shower, I get really good ideas because my brain goes into, what do they say? It goes from alpha to beta, or from beta to gamma, whatever it is, right? I might know that, but again, right, I might know that I act a certain way when I'm at work and a certain way that I'm on vacation, but again, these are all factors that I'm aware of because these are factors that I grew up with. I grew up knowing vacation means being relaxed. Work means you're in, active mode, whatever it is. But there are also levels of consciousness that you're not aware of. Why? Because you haven't you haven't experienced the environment which might have brought that consciousness out. For somebody who's never been to the Western Wall, to the Kotel, they might not be aware of the fact that being in that environment might bring out certain feelings and certain emotions. If you've never met a holy person, you might not ever know what it feels like to be that. If you've never been in love, you won't know, so you can never really know what love feels like. So you might be familiar with all of the emotions and all the moods that you've already experienced, but there's so much more to you that you haven't experienced, because there's so much more aspects of life that you haven't experienced. I don't think anyone, right? We're all present here. We're all, right, in our 20s and our 30s. Our experiences are only limited to the places and the people that we've been surrounded by. But there's so much more that we could experience. So therefore, maybe some of us have tasted spirituality, but spiritual experiences are those that we are always supposed to be looking for more and more and more and more of. And what can I do? Because again, that's where we'll experience love in our life. We'll experience those emotions will happen naturally. But spiritual consciousness will not, it might be thrown upon us. Hopefully we'll be lucky, we'll get a taste of it. But to understand, to reach spiritual levels of consciousness, these are things that we need to search for. We need to look. We need to orchestrate our life in a way that we will have those experiences. So that's what we're talking about when we say consciousness. We're talking about trying to reach an inner state of spiritual connection that is beyond what one would experience just in the course of their day-to-day life. So that's what we mean when we say dvekus, when we say das. We're trying to reach this spiritual expanded consciousness. We're trying to say, oh, I feel a little closer to God, not over here, not in between my ears. Right? It's not an intellectual game. Maybe if I read another book, maybe if I read another book. It's not just about another philosophy. Now you're just trying to know God here a little bit more. It's not even, well, it's somewhat about over here because we do feel spirituality does play a major role in our emotions. But what we're talking about is trying to discover a new part of ourselves. The same way, if you've never been in love, you've never fully experienced this, right? If you've never learn, science or whatever it is. So there are things that you haven't fully experienced here. So there's also things higher than oneself that we haven't fully experienced that we're trying to experience in our spiritual pursuit. Any questions on this? I hope that I'm making sense. Process this for a moment. But if I'm totally not making sense to anyone, if you can just let me know that at least, that I'm happy to clarify. So going back, we're speaking about the spiritual consciousness. So the terms are dvekus and das. Two more words that I want you to know because I want to be able to sort of bounce it around. The next one, fun word, shefa. Shefa means divine flow. When we're talking about manifesting God into the world, we're talking about shefa. Right? So therefore, when I want to unleash God, and obviously God is always present. My favorite song, I've shared this with you before. Not really my favorite song. I don't know why I keep on saying that. My favorite song lyric. There's a song by the singer Avril Lavigne. Remember her? Yes? Avril Lavigne. I don't know. Is she still a thing? Does she still sing anything anymore? I haven't heard her name in forever. Anyways, she had a lyric in her song saying, "You're always there, you're everywhere, but right now I just need you here." I'm not sure that she was talking about Hashem in that song. I'm not sure she was talking about God, but I think that it's such a great description about how we feel about God. You're always there, you're everywhere, but right now I just need you here. Shefa, divine heavenly flow. We're talking about the experience of knowing, of feeling God's presence right here at this moment. Not God in theory, not God in theology, not God in academia. God in the actual, I'm feeling God right now. I'm feeling God's shefa. God, I need your shefa. I'm wishing you, I give you a blessing that you should have shefa in your life. Godly energy, God's interaction. Right? We want to see God. We want to go through our day and say, oh, that was godliness. That was not a coincidence. That was a total, God, you did it this time. That was a setup. You got me. I thought, and you did, and you came in, and that was perfect. God perfectly orchestrated. That's shefa. Finally, the last word that I want to teach you is bracha. Hopefully that's the word that everybody knows, but bracha is similar to shefa, the way we're going to use it, and that is God's blessing or God's heavenly flow. Now listen to this. So again, we brought up emunah before. So now I want to really get to the heart. I wonder if I can get rid of this on the side. So, all right, never mind. Question on the side. Yes. Question. I'm not seeing it. Let me stop my share here. Similar question to before. If we're uncertain that God exists, does that make it very tough to experience Shefa? Yes. It does make, yes, it does make it more difficult. However, if someone is uncertain but says, I'm looking for you and I'm open to it, then one can find it. I think that's the name of the game. Meaning you can search for something, and I think it's the search that opens you up to that. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, the great Hasidic master, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, he says, Emunah, these three words that are so profound. Emunah is tefillah. So tefillah, prayer, is a person trying to get into that state of emunah. Now, one might say, well, what does that mean? I thought prayer is asking God for things. I'm praying for this. I'm praying for that. Can you pray for me, Rabbi? Right? I thought prayer is asking God for things. So again, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is really emphasizing, strengthening the point that we made earlier, that prayer is not an activity, it's a state of mind. Listen to this quote, which I absolutely love. It's a quote that changed my life, and I want to compare this quote, which is a 200-year-old quote, with something that has sort of become very popular in the world of like pop psychology and the world of personal development. This is from Rav Avram Yeshua Heschel of Apt, or the Apta Rebbe. He used to say that, or he wrote that with emunah, that means with this divine awareness, this awareness of God, a person has the power to manifest potential into reality. A person has the power to manifest potential into reality. If you are part of the whole self-development, self-help movement, you might have heard this idea of the law of attraction. Give me a thumbs up if you've heard of this term, law of attraction. This is a very, very, very popular thing. There's so much written on this. Right now. Now, I'm going to give you just two quotes here from sort of the law of attraction movement. One of the early writers about it is Tony Robbins, still well known for this idea. So Tony writes in one of his early books, he says, when the mind has a defined target, it can focus and direct, refocus and redirect until it reaches its intended goal. Without a defined target, its energy is squandered. Our bodies, our brains, and our states are like, this is the line that I love, is like a tuning fork in harmony with that higher level of existence. The better attuned you are, the better aligned you are, the more you can tap into this. Tony Robbins is a self-help guru who makes millions of dollars on his seminars and on his coaching. He's a business guy. He's got a couple of $1 million. He drops the F-bomb every third word that he says. Okay, he's a he's somewhat of an American icon. He's not a guy with a turban. He's not a guy who sits in the lotus position for half the day. He doesn't have a big beard like me, and he's not a rabbi. He's not a preacher. He doesn't wear one of those little white collars, right? None of that. He wears a baseball cap and a t-shirt. And if he wrote this book and he used the term God right there, his book would be Collecting Dust in the Religion section. But because he uses this very sort of modern term and calls it the higher, I'll share my screen again, that higher level of existence, right? And he uses all these terms, it's now put in the self-help section and sells a bazillion copies and makes it onto the New York Times best-selling list. But it's the same thing. It's the same idea. And that is that if you can tune your mind into believing that there is a higher level of existence that you can tap into and you can bring down the Shefa You can bring down the heavenly flow. You can manifest it into reality. Yes, I believe that I have the ability because I believe that there is a higher level existence. I believe that there's a God that I communicate with, that I interact with, that I could become a divine vessel to bring that shefa, to bring that flow into the world, to bring blessing into the world, to make things happen that are positive in my life, because I could connect with God. When you believe that, then the power of emunah, the power of your belief in that, will manifest it into reality, and you will see amazing things happen in your life. And not only that, but when if amazing things don't happen, if challenges manifest themselves into your life, you're gonna interact with those challenges in a completely different way, because you're gonna get a sense, instead of feeling like so many people feel when challenge comes, where they feel abandoned by God. The person who has emunah doesn't feel abandoned by God. That person feels and even sees and senses that this challenge is directly to me. This is a challenge tailor-made to Shlomo Buxbaum. I can feel it. I get it. I just sense that this challenge was one that God literally wrote up specifically for me in my hand. That's what emunah does. That's how emunah is a game changer. Back to the law of attraction, the secret says you are the most powerful magnet in the universe, capital U. By the way, whenever they capitalize the first letter of words like universe, you know what they're trying to tell you without telling it to you. They're trying to say God, but they're trying to speak to the wider audience. So they say universe, capital U. The magnetic power is emitted through your thoughts. Like attracts like. So as you think a thought, you're also attracting like thoughts to you. The power of attraction, or as we say it in Judaism, emunah. Last thing, and then I'll let you go. Just give me one more minute here. Because of that, one could say there's many benefits to tefillah. I outlined over here 5 benefits to tefillah: spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and practical. Spiritually speaking, when a person lives with an awareness of God in your life, that will result in living with greater spirituality. You've just become a more spiritually in tune person. On a mind level, when a person prays, it's through that prayer that they get a greater sense of das, expanded higher consciousness, which leads to clarity. And because of that, your whole thinking process as you go through your life, you're just viewing life with these divine glasses. You're just seeing things with greater clarity. Emotional. When a person lives with this emunah, you live with less worry and less anxiety and stress, because again, you just feel in tune. You're like, I just feel plugged in. I just feel God in my life. I know that it's going to be okay. I know that I can handle it. Your body, physical. Many physical pains and ailments or lack of vitality come from the stress and anxiety. So once you start relieving that stress, you relieve that anxiety, you'll feel better also. Your body feel more energy. And finally, just practically speaking, a person will see more of his or her desires realized when their emunah increases. Because through emunah, you're manifesting that into your life. Okay, next week we'll just do a final introduction. We'll speak a little bit now. So today we spoke about the power of emunah, the power of belief, the power of awareness of God. We haven't really spoken about the role that speech plays, why we have to speak it, and why not just meditate it. So we'll speak about that next week, and that will be our introduction, and then we'll actually jump into the process that will be the week following that. So thank you everyone for joining. I hope everyone's will have a relaxed week this week if you're taking off from work or maybe a little bit of lighter schedule. But yeah, if anyone wants to meet more about this in person, you know how to find me. So thank you all again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Have a good night.